Hello, hello. Dr. Sarah, your brain gal here. And we are talking about brains today, but specifically ADHD. And I'm really excited to share a bunch of information with you today about ADHD and what it means from a brain-based perspective and how we can support our kiddos who have either a diagnosis of this, or it's very possible that your kids may fall on a spectrum of inattention, but not necessarily meet criteria for a diagnosis. So it's really important that we start talking about these things now so that we have a good sense of how the brain works and how the brain develops. So what we have here is we have Franny, of course. If you've heard me talk a lot about Franny, that's the part of the brain that's going to control and regulate. And then we have other parts of our brain that are responsible for emotion, behavior, for cognition, those kinds of things. And so when we're talking about a diagnosis of ADHD, what we're talking about is really a Franny issue. We're talking about control, we're talking about regulation. And so it's not that we're having inappropriate behaviors necessarily or inappropriate emotions or any of those things. It's that they're not being regulated. And I'll give you an example of this. You might be driving in a car, someone might cut you off, and you might think, oh, I want to kill that person, or oh, I'm so angry at them, or some other choice words. Most of us, especially in the company of kids or other people, would be able to hold that in our heads. But when we have an issue where we have a control issue with the brain, a lot of times what's happening is that those things can't be controlled or regulated. So sometimes these things come out of kids' mouths. I'm going to kill you, right? Which, if that happens, that might be a thought you might have, but you would keep to yourself. It's something that's going to come out because it's not going to be controlled or regulated. And it's a really important distinction to talk about whether it's control or regulation, or whether it is more of a deep-seated, more psychiatric kind of issue that we have to deal with. So when you're thinking about your kiddos and you're wondering about whether or not they meet a criteria for ADHD, or even if they've been diagnosed and you're worried about some of these behaviors, I want you to really think about this control regulation issue. Is it just that they are letting things out of their mouths or letting things out of their bodies, or doing behaviors that are that's difficult for them to regulate? Or is it that they're really actually inappropriate to begin with? And so sometimes I like to do a mental check to think, how would I act in that situation? Or what would that look like in different situations? So now, before we get any further, I want to say a few things about the diagnosis of ADHD in particular. Oftentimes, these kiddos are awesome kiddos. They are creative and interested and interesting, and they have ideas that are outside of the box, and they can be fun to talk to and engage with. And they could just be really kind of neat kiddos. On the flip side of that, we also can have times where they might get a little too close to people, or socially might have trouble understanding that people need a little bit of space, right? So it's not that they don't understand what other people are thinking and feeling. As a matter of fact, they tend to at a pretty good level. It's that they can't stop themselves from getting too close, or from interrupting other people, or from really kind of getting in spaces that typically kids would pull back from a little bit. So again, a lot of times this isn't really about issues with the thoughts and behaviors themselves. It's about control and it's about regulation. So it's really about this connection here again, and strengthening Franny. So when we give kids with ADHD stimulant medications, it may seem counterintuitive. Why would you give a kid who might be bouncing off the walls and running around, and maybe, as we call it, driven by a motor and can't stop moving? Why would we give them a stimulant? Or why would we give kids a stimulant that are interrupting and can't stop themselves? It's actually because it takes more brain power to control and regulate than it does to not. And so what we're doing is we're increasing the amount of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter your brain uses to connect in this particular case. We're giving them more dopamine so that they can actually hold things back and inhibit and slow down and stay in one place and all of those things. So again, these things are always scales. Strengths are always weaknesses, and vice versa. So just remember, when you're working with your kiddo, whether you're a teacher listening to this, working with kids in the schools, or whether you're a parent thinking about your own kiddo with ADHD, remember that there is always a plus side to the minus side, right? So the same things that make them creative and outside of the box thinkers and kids that like to know how things go together are going to be the same ones that potentially have trouble with going a little too far with some of that and not being able to stop themselves from things. So there's always going to be this balance. So the reason, again, that we give kids this stimulant medication is to give them more power to work with, so to help them. The other question I often get asked about kids with ADHD is how come they can pay attention to video games or to things they quote like, but they can't pay attention to other things. And there's two things I would say to that. The first is that with a video game, oh my goodness, is there a lot to pay attention to. So the jumping of attention that happens in something like a video game or YouTube or TikTok is something that lends itself really well to an ADHD brain because you want to jump around. It's jump, 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 jump of attention, not long, sustained attention. And so when you're watching TikTok or when you're playing these video games, there's constant things that will pull their attention. And so they're going to do a lot of attention jumping. So it looks like they can sit and pay attention for a long time, but what really happens is their brain is jumping from one thing to a next. And you might notice that after that, you'll see some fatigue. So they may get cranky or whiny or really just tired and grumpy after spending a long time on those games, just like anybody would, because of the amount of brain power it is required to jump, 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 jump. So that's generally why they can do video games for a long period of time, but not sit in a class and listen for a long period of time. So that is one issue. The other is that when we like something, we naturally get that extra dopamine rush to the front of our brain. So dopamine is the chemical that we will naturally get, our bodies will create for the front of our brain. So when we really like something, we get that natural shot. That's why reinforcement works. It's why, if I say, oh, if I get this report written, then I'm going to be able to go, I don't know, get my nails done, or I'm going to go do something nice for myself if I get this done, because that's actually what helps to give my own brain some natural chemicals. So when it comes to ADHD, somebody who may lack the dopamine chemical in the brain in the first place, when they like something, they get natural dopamine, which means they're getting more brain power to work with. So just like anyone, whenever they like something, they're going to be able to do more. But it's not just about motivation as a concept. It's actually because their brain gets more chemical when they like something. So if you're a teacher in a school, this is why teaching kids how to write with a topic that they like is really important, because you're giving them more of that attention chemical. You're giving them, their brains, actually more to work with. The concept that, well, they need to learn to write about things they don't like, that's after they write, after they know the skill, then they can apply it somewhere else. But we always want to pick a high interest topic because this is what is going to actually give that natural rush. So that is ADHD in a nutshell. It is about control. It is about regulation. And that's a very different intervention than someone like on the autism spectrum who might need help understanding how people think and feel. These kiddos know those things. It's just that they have trouble holding thoughts or behaviors or emotions back, which then can limit their interactions with peers. So think about it when you're helping your kids, trying to figure out what skill do they need to build. Think about those control, those regulation skills, stopping before they act or react, right? Trying to figure out maybe counting to 3 before they get close, looking at space between other kids and themselves, taking a breath before they talk. These are all kind of pausing strategies that they can use that are going to help to slow them down and teach them how to regulate a little bit. And then the final comment I want to make is that self-monitoring and self-awareness is really important when it comes to kiddos with ADHD, because sometimes we lack this skill. So if we want kids to be able to pay attention, we have to teach the skill of paying attention. That means we have to bring that skill up to Franny and make her aware of what is paying attention and what is not paying attention. And you'll notice if you have a kiddo with ADHD, they'll come home and you'll say, well, how was today? They'll say, I don't know. I think it was okay. And if you say, well, did the teacher say anything? They'll say, yeah, the teacher yelled at me a lot. Well, what did you do? I don't know. Well, what did she say? Well, she said I wasn't paying attention. Well, were you? And they'll say, I guess not. I don't know. They really don't have any understanding. So the first thing we have to do with those kiddos is bring to their awareness, to their Franny, what paying attention even is. So you can do something as simple as have them check a box of, yes, I was paying attention, or no, I wasn't. every time a little buzzer goes off. So every 3 minutes, maybe they check I was or I wasn't paying attention. And you can do the game with them. You could even play a game with them and do it at the same time. And just ask them, hey, do your marks match my marks? And you can reward them. Remember, we want the extra shot of dopamine. You reward them for just matching. So they can have all things in the not paying attention column. And if that was right, if that matches yours, they get that reward. And once they can do that, where they can actually identify whether they are or aren't paying attention, then you can move to adding that reinforcement for actually paying attention. So once they get it, you can say, okay, now you know what it is. Now you need to be 95% in this column with me. And then you can move on. But we often skip the skill building. We often skip the part where we teach them the skill. So remember, when you're thinking about ADHD, you're thinking about building skills. If you've been following me for a while, you know you need to think about, what does this little brain need to learn? What can I teach this little brain? And when you're being that brain detective and you're looking for things, you're looking for control and regulation skills in your kiddos with ADHD. So we want to teach them these skills because we don't want to smush the creativity and the enthusiasm and the socialization that tends to happen with ADHD. These are, I can't say enough, they're cool kiddos. They see the world in such different ways. They have the ability to think about lots of things at one time. Those are all great skills. We just want to kind of hone them in and help them in a more typical environment. One that they may not need to be in once they're out of school, but once they're in school, it's definitely a very structured environment that requires a lot of attention. So we want to help them figure out some strategies for learning some of those skills. So if you've got a kiddo with ADHD, remember their strengths and pay attention to the skills that they need to build. And they're probably these Franny skills that we need to work on, and use those self-monitoring plans to help to bring awareness. So Franny knows about it. If Franny doesn't know about it, she can't work to modify or change that or build that skill. So let's bring it to Franny's attention. And that's our ADHD little training for today. If you have any questions, you can always put them in the chat or message me or send me an email directly. And there's a lot more information on our website you can always go to, which is brainbehaviorbridge.com. And Friday on Instagram, I'm going to be going over some information about 504 and IEPs in a very general sense, because I know you're all over the country. So if you're concerned or unsure about where your kiddo falls, join us Friday at 2:30 Eastern Standard Time on Instagram. And I will talk a little bit more about the general concept of special education and 504 plans and general education, to give you a sense of what services we're able to provide in the school when kiddos need a little extra support on skills just like these. And that is Dr.Sarah L. Allen, SARAHLALLEN. And if you haven't followed us yet, you can join us then. If you have questions specifically about that topic, just message me on Instagram and I'll cover them all on Friday for you. So nice to see everybody. I hope you had a chance to join me. We were talking about ADHD and control and regulation and bringing information up to that Franny. So if you just joined me, pop back a little bit and you get to see the whole thing. And again, message me if you have questions. See you all soon. Bye-bye.